Welcome everyone to our continued digital training that we have here at Advisicon. My name's Tim Runcie and I'm excited to present to you today on the Disciplines of Agile Delivery, otherwise known as DAD. We've got quite a few questions that have come in about this and how this works. So as you know, as both a methodology and a technology company, we really look at how do we make these pieces fit well together. So again, from my background, I set up a lot of time putting in organizational growth and development and helping people build a project management culture. As a project MVP, I look at certainly some of the flavors and the technologies that go together, but you never do disconnect usually a tool from an approach of getting that done. And that's kind of where Agile comes in for us today. So as we're looking at what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about Disciplined Agile Delivery. And the intent here is this overview is to help you understand how this may impact you, perhaps how you're going to take advantage of this, and then, why are there so many different Agile disciplines? Talking about different approaches and their values, pros and cons of Disciplined Agile. And then we're going to get into a little bit of the best practices or things that you should be thinking about, perhaps if you are interested in moving this direction. So again, without further ado, let's talk about our Agile delivery, or as we get into, we call that Disciplined Agile. So one of the things that comes up very commonly is people go, Agile, 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 almost like Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. Why are we seeing this over and over again? Why are there so many flavors? Well, as you think about when Agile started back in the late 90s and definitely into 2001 when the manifesto was written, there was a big shift in understanding how does this impact technical teams. Well, as you know, the history of Agile certainly started around development and software development, but that extension has certainly changed. And if you think about iterative learning or Kaizen and the process of moving forward, is that you definitely need to iterate. Well, Agile can't stay static. There can't just be a few disciplines. And so as you begin looking at the growth of where did Disciplined Agile or Disciplined Agile Delivery come from, even itself adopted new models, it's infused new changes, and people started adopting Agile that were even outside of the technology world of software development. So Disciplined Agile is really a toolkit. I think that's kind of important. It's not just a single approach. Really the idea is to avoid a framework or a framework prison that says, oh, we're locked into a dogmatic approach. And this time, it's not just about a team delivering a product, it's about organizational ability to be agile. So really looking at that business agility, if you will, which is an important part of making sure that you are maximizing your productivity. So now we're not just talking about an execution methodology or a project management methodology, we're talking about really creating a culture of delivery and value. And again, this whole DAD component really blends hundreds of different types of practices in Agile and allows you to kind of morph or transform into something that will fit your culture and your needs. Now again, some of this is that the fact that the original roles back, if you think about Scrum or Kanban, is, hey, I've got chickens and pigs. Well, we have way more people that we need to consider. And not just the technical teams that are doing the delivery, it's also important for them to incorporate the fact that a product just isn't built. It may be designed by marketing. It has to be sold by sales. It has to be cared for by DevOps. And so operations, finance, all have touch points involved in producing a solution. And that's important that we want to enable and bring in that organization for some of those cultural changes. Now, thinking in terms of the original Agile Manifesto back in 2001, what's really fun about this is that the whole concept really was that, individuals over interactions, working software over comprehensive documentation. And while there's value of things on the left and certainly things on the right, the importance is that it was really about iteration. Well, in 2001, if you can imagine software today, mobile phones today, things are radically different. And Agile has certainly taken the market by storm in terms of technology side of things, but an organization does not just live and die on what their dev teams are doing. It's important to balance those out. So on our slide here, we have kind of the extended manifesto that was really about 2009 to 2012 kind of redefined. And the intent was that individuals and interactions are certainly important, but those may be, in a sense, we talk about what's on the left versus the right, is it's not just about the people and the interaction, which is important, but now we're talking about consumable solutions. Now think about that. We're not talking about working software. We're talking about a consumable solution. So the idea of an organization is that we have stakeholders, we have people, we have customers, there's a lot of interaction, but the idea is that there's a response, there's an agility to looking at something that's happened. And if you're thinking about the chaos that COVID-19 has created, or this whole VUCA environment that we are responding to in terms of building and delivering value for customers, it's important to make sure that there is transparency. And so this was revised, this Disciplined Agile was a framework that was redefined kind of in a process that said, as I pull the elements together, I really want to make sure that we can actually apply this more broadly through that organization. And it's exciting because it isn't just one touch point. It really is an element that's designed to lead an organization to business productivity. Now, moving through that, the idea of an agile organization, in many cases, if we look at the values to methods that are in delivery, is that there's a lot of different methodologies out there. All of them are typically what we refer to as a complex adaptive system. Now think about that. It's an adaptive. It's taking a look at a process, making sure things are getting done, but in many cases there are different moving parts, and so it has to be adaptive to adjust for some of the ambiguity or perhaps the volatility of what's happening, or perhaps things change so fast that you have to be reflexive and adaptive in tuning the solution that you're trying to put out into the market. Again, this is organized in terms of the value. So if we're thinking about an agile approach to things, we really have this agile pyramid. And the idea is that there's values, principles, and methods. And there's lots of methods that you can bring together. Bringing DAD into the equation is helpful because now we talk about, well, listen, we might have a scaled agile framework or SAFe, but again, there's maybe a holistic approach that's outside of just a technical organization. So the values are certainly the way things are accomplished, and principles are the guiding processes that'll help us make sure that we deliver. But the methods can be very diverse depending upon who you are or what your organization is or what's the right fit for you. And in that process, we really think about why is it important and perhaps why should you use this scaled framework or this moving into this digital environment? Well, as we look at this change in how the market is happening, is that it's important for us to ensure that Disciplined Agile isn't just something that says, well, listen, we're going to force everybody into a framework or a box. What it's really about is giving an agility of scale. Now think about that for a moment. If you're extending a focused life cycle, so we're talking about, say, maybe Scrum or Kanban into delivery, but now we really extend that out from cradle to grave or womb to tomb, or even beyond that, is that in delivering a solution, it isn't just about quickly saying, hey, this met the mark, let's move on. It's about caring, feeding, and making the organization continue to adjust and adapt so that you can modify and move those things forward. These consumable solutions don't just stop at the technical or development teams. They really extend across the entire organization. And as we talked about, we're now going to be looking at infusing risk to value. Now, what's interesting is our marketing director here, she calls it the grief to benefit ratio. And I think that's important because as we look at what do we need to do, well, it might be exciting that the customer wants this one feature, but now we have to look at, can we support it? Can we make it profitable? Can we market it? Are we in compliance? Is this something that's going to become obsolete? So there's a bigger spectrum of what we look at in terms of moving a solution out to market. And the overall idea is that the solutions are enterprise aware. They're not just a single customer focus, but really looking at the organization as a whole, or perhaps the industry as a whole, as you're delivering it. And so if we take these processes and we say, well, listen, if I'm going to take Agile for everyone, there are many layers to this. And so if you look at the slide here, we've got a diagram that says, well, there's digital, agile, enterprise. Why? So we could take this and say, we could do this graphically and visually. But now I have Disciplined Agile Enterprise. It says an overarching look at the organization. We could talk about Disciplined Agile for IT or Disciplined for DevOps. And inherently the idea is that delivery might come through many different mechanisms. So DAD, or Disciplined Agile Delivery, in a sense, is really helping you focus on the execution methodology. But it's not done without only looking at one part of the puzzle. It pulls those pieces together. So again, that holistic approach for the organization, and it allows everyone to be part of that. So if we're thinking in terms of some of the use case scenarios, like for example, where would you actually run into and use this? In many cases, organizations who want to leverage the success of Agile, this is a natural progression. Now, I get personally excited for the fact that when we talk about building a culture, in many cases, it's about standardizing your processes, your procedures. If you've ever been involved in setting up a project management office or a project control center, the idea is that we want to change the hearts and minds and culture and create repeatable processes that we can measure the information. Well, that might be good for the dev team or the IT team, but then again, what if we could replicate this all across the board? So in many cases, organizations who begin to move to this simply think in terms of the fact that, hey, listen, it works well here, it's not a new concept to us, we're going to extend that out through the organization. Again, another scenario that this comes into play is when organization and divisions are required to deliver solutions and many different types of solutions, not just one product all the time, but really coming up with multiple items. This is a great fit for in terms of that. Leveraging approaches, so if you might be blending Scrum and SAFe and extreme programming or test-driven development or even Lean, these all fit under that framework. And the idea is that you can bring these approaches together and differentiate, but then have some governance across how you deliver Agile in a disciplined fashion holistically. And again, it's a good toolkit to scale up an organization. So the idea is it begins to gather people together, align them or galvanize them towards a single focus and help everyone in that organization be working towards that final end state solution. Now, in many cases, if you're thinking about moving to a DAD, the overall idea is that methods may be restrictive if you've been doing it before. Perhaps maybe you found that just it didn't quite work, or hey, listen, it was very dogmatic. True story, I was at an organization, and they will remain nameless, and so will the project manager, and they were trying to implement a very complex solution that required a lot of different moving parts. And they knew that they wanted to be very agile in this process. But in that process, they began to exclude the customer because the customer was not necessarily liking all the things that were being done. And at some point, I approached the project manager and said, hey, listen, doesn't it make sense in Agile that the customer should be involved in this conversation and be here? And they got really frustrated because they were beginning to slip back into a very dogmatic approach. So if you've seen Agile not work, or in many cases it worked only in certain areas but it didn't work holistically, this is beginning to mature and move the organization where you can leverage maybe more flexible pieces to help that happen in your business, unit, team, or overall organization. So that business agility versus local team agility is important. And again, we talk about that pragmatism versus purism. If you dogmatically or puristically stick to something, it might work for some scenarios or certain parts of the organization, but there may need to be similar pieces but more flexible models. So the whole idea of disciplined agile for delivery is something that you can look at helping to scale organizations. Now, pros and cons. There are pros and there are cons to doing this. And so one of the ideas that we want to think about is if we're going to actually deliver, in disciplined agile, what we want to do is think about what are the pros or the values that this actually brings to the table. So first off is that there are many, many more roles that you can actually include. So not just chickens and pigs, and if you don't know what that means, I say take a look at the Scrum model. But the idea is that you have entire teams and stakeholders. You have specialists, you have support individuals who are involved. And so the idea is that you can actually galvanize and build a larger team to be involved in that process. And you can tailor this based upon your organization. So it's a really good fit to begin to get everyone moving across into this agile framework that isn't necessarily just the technical teams. Again, one of the benefits that you will see as an organization, and this is important, is that this will help you increase the rate of your process improvement. So now it's not just saying Agile's the silver bullet, it'll take care of everything, it's the miracle pill. What you're really looking at is an iterative process where people are focusing on the highest value things first and then begin to standardize what that is across the board. It supports all different types of teams. And of course, there's a governance that you can actually put in place that says we are an execution-focused organization, and what we can do is we can align the entire org so that we have a holistic view of what we need externally, internally, to sell it, manage it, care and feed for it, or at least to make sure that the end stakeholders are happy and it isn't just something that's a flash in the pan. Again, this begins to set the foundation for business agility or organizational agility, and it allows you to take maybe localized success and spread that across the organization. Again, this is an optimized workflow of how you begin to execute. So Disciplined Agile Delivery, this DAD concept, takes it to the next level. Kind of like a project management office would say is we're going to standardize how we do project management here. Well, we're not just looking at only the methodology, but it's also digging into some of the execution side and pieces. And all of these fit very well together. Now, if we think in terms of how this fits, in many cases, Microsoft, even if you look at what they're trying to do, is it's not a single tool for project management. In fact, if you look at the slide right now, and I'm sure you're probably laughing going, oh, Tim the Tool Man found a way to sneak in technology tools here. Well, for sure, if you look across the board of what Microsoft's doing, you can see that there's Alexa and Cortana, we have Post-it notes, OneNote, we have Project, we have Power Automate, Microsoft Graph, and oh my goodness, there's all kinds of things in Microsoft Teams and Planner. Well, it's not just one tool fits the organization for everything. It's really about a holistic system that says, you know what, if it's a bag of hammers, pick the right hammer for the job. And so this allows in a framework that says we can give you something that's much more adaptable versus forcing a specific type of agile methodology on everyone. And that's important. So even Microsoft recognizes the need for agile tools across the board, including some of the things that they have. If you zero in on what they're doing in the project management side of things, even looking at something called project operations, which is coming out of Dynamics, which is designed to integrate with their project PPM system, you can look at, hey, look, there's Microsoft To Do or something now called the Task Hub coming for Microsoft Teams. Planner, most added app in Microsoft Teams is Planner. People want to know quickly, how do I do Kanban? I just need a work management solution. And maybe I don't need the big project program and portfolio piece. So as we think about the organization, whether it's work management, task management, project program, and portfolio management, there are layers and there are pieces that say, you know what, this may be too heavy, this might be lighter. And the idea of Disciplined Agile Delivery is that, again, taking this framework of tools and approaches and methods, you can actually weave this across the board and make sure that you can continue with execution. Now, there's certainly challenges. We can talk about pros and cons, and that's helpful to know. But also there are challenges. If you're thinking about, wow, this sounds great for my organization, what are some of the pitfalls to watch out for? Well, first off, what I'm describing isn't something you can implement overnight. It requires time. It requires that stakeholders are identified and brought in. This is always best implement when you have an organizational adoption, which means that if you struggle to have a culture to make changes, you're going to have to, if you're going to think about changing your org, get people to come to the table. There has to be an agreement. What does really agile mean for each part of the touch points in your system? So as an organization, what does agile mean for marketing versus what does it mean for our technical development teams versus what does it mean for operations? And again, having top-down management is always best. So if you don't have that, it will be harder to create organizational agility to move this framework through. Again, one of the things I want to encourage people to avoid is what I call the buzzwords. Oh, we're doing Agile. I hear people tell me that all the time. And I'm like, great, what does that mean to you? And they say, well, we have stand-up meetings. I'm like, okay. Are you doing anything else? They say, yeah, we have stand-up meetings, and then we put our notes into a folder, and we kind of track what we're doing on the whiteboard. And I'm thinking, okay, Agile comes in many different shapes and flavors, but it's something that isn't just a buzzword. You don't just drop this out and say, we're doing Agile. This is something you'll need to embrace. And it's important that it requires good facilitation. Again, whether you're bringing in an outside consultant or you dedicate a team, kind of like our project control center or our project office, is that this is their job, is to help facilitate this culture building of making sure you can move and deliver agilely through an organization and putting those pieces in place. So again, it also requires care, feeding, and tuning. Again, it's iterative, right? We want to make sure that we're collecting that information, centralizing how the organization is doing in its execution, but also the idea is that the organization will be making changes and tuning and adjustments, and we can't have fractures. We have to kind of keep the whole wagon train moving together across the board. So in terms of best practices, I think there's some elements that say if you were looking to jump into this, I would absolutely try and make sure that you've got the right fit for you. And so the idea is that if you need to make a choice between what is right and what is easy, hence Professor Dumbledore's explanation, is that you might go, well, maybe it's a mixture of different pieces. And again, that's important, is to be able to find what that is. So if you're going to implement Disciplined Agile Delivery, or if you're even going to go into the toolkit of Disciplined Agile, the idea is that you want to treat it the same way, which is you're going to map your processes. You want to make sure you have some governance. A lot of times we equate this very similar to a project office. And the idea is that, hey, listen, we want to standardize what we're doing across the organization, and we're going to move through as a group beginning to implement the constructs of Agile in each of the different areas. Again, you're going to focus, of course, at the team level, because this is really where execution happens. But the idea that team level across the entire solution you're putting together is important. Not just one part of it, but really bringing everyone together. And again, you're going to weave Scrum and Kanban, perhaps you're Lean, or you're looking at test-driven development, or you're thinking about a scaled Agile framework of structure around that. There are lots of different methodologies. Crystal is another one. But the idea is that you're going to begin to bring the right pieces to the table, which means there needs to be an understanding of what's the right fit and what's the wrong fit, and not to implement something that doesn't make sense for part of the organization that might be better for somewhere else. Overall, there still is a collection of work activities that move together. Again, you got to have that oversight and that connectedness. So important for people to really recognize the fact that this isn't something that just happens in a vacuum or magically just appears. It's something that you really want to intentionally invest in. And again, if you're new to Agile, I don't recommend jumping into the entire organization. What I would do is begin to implement maybe a pilot. Try some of the pieces out. See how it works. But if you've never seen Agile before in an organization, that is a pretty big uplift to try and jump on. Again, if you're establishing consistent tools across your organization, as we call single source of truth, it's important for us to be able to say documentation, notes, dashboards, schedules, delivery are really one across the entire solution delivery team. We want to bring those pieces together. And the idea is that drilling down in the details or rolling up are helpful, and this will help your artificial intelligence or your machine learning or your Internet of Things of saying we can connect the data, allows you to do some analysis to look at where the improvements are and where you can tune that. And while that's great with certain teams, this is wonderful across the entire organization. So one of the things I like to get into, of course, is what is the Disciplined Agile links and references? Where does all this information reside? Certainly you're not going to be a master at this in 30 minutes video watching me, but I want to get you excited about things that potentially may help you. So I've got some white paper articles here. We certainly have our learning management system, which I encourage you to go out and take a look at some of the articles, blog posts, things that we've written. We're going to continue to put videos out there, but there's some other great reference points, including the Project Management Institute, www.pmi.org. They actually have a whole entire section, very well done, on Disciplined Agile. And so you could take a peek at that. If you've been thinking about this or looking about how does Disciplined Agile Delivery, IT, Enterprise might fit for your organization, there's another one out there called the Agile Consortium, and I encourage people to go take a look at that. That's the amazing thing about the internet today, is that you've got this encyclopedia of information that's out there, and you can actually dig in and see, is this the right fit for you? So in terms of putting the elements together, I want to kind of summarize a couple things here for you. First off, Disciplined Agile Delivery, DAD, is a great organizational structure or framework that you can begin to move through. But it isn't something that you just suddenly just turn on overnight and have happen. There's intent, there's in planning. But again, it is designed to be iterative and reflexive. Remember, all Agile methods are complex adaptive systems. They're adaptive, which right now, if you're dealing with crisis or if you're in the middle of a COVID-19 reorg and a restructure, these are things that you'll want to be able to make sure that you are really jumping on and saying, how can we be more adaptive? We want to see, is this actually working in the marketplace, and not just drop something for one customer, but maybe holistically look how you're going to care and field and scale that. It's great when people buy something that's good. It's even better when you build a long-term relationship. It's something that you can manage. And that is part of where DAD fits in place. Again, you get multiple different methodologies. It's not just one. So you're not bound by a framework prison. You can really adapt it, tune it, and it's designed to work at the team level. But again, broadening the team and the roles are helpful with this agile approach. Again, we also get into ideas that it isn't just about one single part of the delivery system. It's really from cradle to grave or beyond. And I like the beyond piece because people forget when I get done, project managers have delivered a project, they throw it over the fence into the operations team, and now suddenly they're struggling to care and feed and manage. And while you may have delivered a great solution, it may not be shepherded, cared, sold, or managed well, which may be the death of this. So the idea of an organization being able to carry this agility through and maintain support and deliver the right iterative value or tune the value of the solution they're trying to deliver, especially with all the craziness that's going on in the world today, is absolutely imperative. It is a business mission critical solution that helps people separate them from their competition. Again, if you're thinking in terms of requiring people getting in to use this, is that you need to get buy-in, right? This isn't just one team taking off and doing this. It's an organizational approach. And of course, the more buy-in you get, the faster you implement. And of course, when we talk about process improvement, you'll see net returns that are significant. So again, have a goal. Test it, feature, sprint, put some places in here, pilot it if you want to, but the overall idea is you can blend these pieces together. So again, thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Tim Runcie, and my contact information is on this slide. I encourage you to reach out with questions. If you need some coaching or guidance here, it's something that we certainly teach and consult on. But overall, the idea is that find the right fit for your organization, whether it's a technology, a methodology, or a blend of the two. That's where we fit. So again, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed our session.